My husband cheated with my son's 18-year-old girlfriend / Reddit family tales / best Reddit story. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved one. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. The day had started perfectly. The sun was warm, music played in the backyard, and the smell of grilled burgers filled the air. It was Ethan's 18th birthday, and the yard was full of neighbors, friends, and family. Mark stood by the grill, laughing with a beer in his hand. Ethan sat with his friends, including Kayla, the girl he'd been dating for almost a year. She was sweet, polite, and always offered to help. I had never imagined anything was off. I slipped into the kitchen to bring out the cake I'd spent the morning decorating. It was a simple chocolate cake with blue icing that read, "Happy 18th, Ethan." I could hear the muffled voices and laughter from outside through the open windows. Then, as I passed the laundry room, I froze. A low, breathy moan came from behind the closed door. At first, I thought it might be two of the teenagers sneaking away from the party. My hand was already reaching for the doorknob when I noticed something on the floor. It was Mark's jacket. My stomach tightened. Why would his jacket be in here? I opened the door. The scene hit me like a punch. Mark and Kayla were pressed against the dryer, half-dressed, tangled together like they didn't even care if someone saw. My voice caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My eyes darted between them, searching for some kind of explanation that didn't exist. Kayla turned her head, her hair falling over her flushed face. Her voice was calm, almost smug. "He said you wouldn't care." Those words sliced through me. I looked at Mark. He didn't even try to move away. His eyes were wide, but his mouth stayed shut, like he couldn't decide if he should beg or deny. My hands were shaking as I stepped back. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I just turned, the cake still in my arms, and walked toward the back door. My legs felt heavy, like every step took more effort than the last. The moment I stepped outside, I tripped over the deck step. The cake slipped from my hands, crashing to the wooden boards with a dull thud. Blue icing smeared across my sandals. The music stopped. Heads turned. Ethan stood up from his chair, looking between me, the ruined cake, and the house behind me. The quiet felt heavier than any noise. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to work, but nothing came out. The sound of my own breathing filled my ear. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mark in the doorway, Kayla just behind him, straightening her clothes. Every pair of eyes in the yard was on us now, and I knew, in that instant, nothing about my family would ever be the same again. We sat at the table like strangers. The food was on our plates, but nobody seemed interested in eating. I had told them both to come out and sit down. My voice had been flat, controlled, but my hands had been trembling when I set out the plates. Ethan kept glancing at me between bites, his brow drawn tight. I avoided his eyes. Across from me, Kayla sat with her arms crossed, leaning back like she was the one who'd been wronged. "It's not what you think," she said suddenly, her voice soft but laced with accusation. "You're making it into something it's not." I didn't answer. I cut a piece of roast beef and chewed slowly, though my stomach twisted. Mark cleared his throat. "It was a stupid mistake, okay? Let's not blow this out of proportion. Not tonight. It's Ethan's birthday. Let's not ruin it for him." I kept my eyes on my plate. The fork in my hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "Seriously," Kayla went on. "You don't understand. We were talking, and things." I put my fork down, the clink against the plate louder than I meant. "Enough," I said quietly. Ethan's eyes flicked between us, confusion and suspicion mixing in his face. The conversation stumbled into silence. The rest of the meal was just the sound of forks and knives on plates, none of us really eating. When the cake came out, another store-bought one Lisa had run to get. Nobody even clapped when Ethan blew out the candles. The candles burned down too far, the wax dripping into the frosting before anyone noticed. Mark tried to smile through it all, laughing too loudly at nothing. Kayla scrolled through her phone when she thought no one was looking. I sat there, my hands in my lap, counting the seconds until everyone left. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the kitchen was clean, I closed myself in my bedroom. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, when I heard a soft knock. "It's me," Ethan said. His voice was low. I opened the door. His face was serious, his jaw set. "What's going on? You've been off all night. And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you." I hesitated, but he didn't look away. I told him. Every detail. My voice stayed even, but my hands curled into fists in my lap. When I finished, he stood there for a moment, breathing hard. His eyes didn't soften like I expected. Instead, they darkened. "I'll handle this," he said finally, his voice cold. "Ethan." I started, but he was already stepping back into the hall. He looked over his shoulder once. "My way." The door clicked shut behind him, and I sat frozen, unsure whether I was more afraid for him or for Mark and Kayla. By Monday morning, the whispers had started. I didn't have to ask how. Things like this always found a way out. High school hallways were made for gossip, and this one had more than enough fuel. Kayla stopped showing up to classes after the first day back. A friend of Ethan's told me she'd been cornered near the parking lot by a group of girls, all smirking and asking if she was still into older men. Ethan didn't deny starting it. He didn't look guilty either. I began getting messages. Some were from old neighbors, others from people I barely knew. Half of them offered sympathy in hushed tone. The other half asked for details like it was some kind of entertainment. I ignored them all. Lisa showed up one evening with a bottle of wine and a look that said she was ready to fight someone. "Throw him out," she said before even sitting down. "Why are you letting him stay in this house?" I poured her a glass but didn't drink mine. "Not yet." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Not yet. He's sleeping under your roof, eating your food. After." I cut her off. "I know exactly what he's doing. I'm not ready to let him walk away and start over like nothing happened. I want him to feel it. Every day. I want him stuck." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. She knew me well enough to see I'd made up my mind. Mark kept up his act around the house, smiling, making small talk, pretending nothing had changed. But I noticed the way his shoulders tensed when his phone buzzed. I noticed how he stayed in the den longer than usual after work, probably hoping I'd go to bed before he did. Ethan, on the other hand, was harder to read. He kept his voice low when he answered texts. Sometimes I'd walk past his room late at night and hear him whispering on the phone. When I asked, he'd shrug it off with a "just talking to friends." But there was a sharpness in his tone lately, a focus I hadn't seen before. He'd leave the house with his backpack and no explanation, gone for hours. One night, as I passed by the living room, I saw him hunched over his laptop, typing fast. When he noticed me, he closed it without looking up. "Homework?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. I didn't press. Something was building in him. I could feel it in the way he watched Mark at the dinner table, in the way his phone seemed to light up with messages every few minutes. I didn't know the details, but I didn't need to. Whatever he was planning, it wasn't small. And I could tell, without either of us saying it, that I was going to let him finish before I made my own move. It happened on a Thursday evening. Mark came home early, tossed his jacket over a chair, and went straight to the kitchen to make a drink. I'd been waiting for the right chance, and this felt like it. While he stepped out to grab something from the garage, I set my phone on the counter, camera face down, recording. I moved around the kitchen like nothing was unusual, rinsing dishes, humming softly. Mark came back in, glass in hand, and dialed a number. I didn't have to look to know who it was. "Hey, baby," he said, his voice low and warm in a way it hadn't been for me in years. I kept scrubbing a plate, my back turned, my hands steady. "Yeah, I'll come by this weekend," he said. "I'm working on it. Just as soon as the money's sorted, I'll be out of here. You know I want you." There was a pause while she must have said something. Then he chuckled. "Last time was, God, I can't stop thinking about it." That night, I didn't need to hear the rest. My jaw clenched, but my face stayed calm. After a few more whispered promises, he hung up. I slipped the phone into my pocket, excused myself, and went upstairs. Sitting on the bed, I played it back. Every word was clear, every ugly laugh perfectly captured. The next morning, I sent the audio from a new email account with no name attached. One copy went to Kayla's parents, another to her school principal. I didn't add anything in the message, just the file. By that evening, Kayla's car was gone from her parents' driveway. Lisa texted me, saying she'd heard Kayla had been kicked out. Her parents had told her to pack her things and leave. At dinner, Mark's mood was dark. He poked at his food, glancing at me now and then. After Ethan left the table, he leaned back in his chair. "You had something to do with this, didn't you?" His voice was low, sharp. I raised my eyebrows. "With what?" He narrowed his eyes. "Don't play dumb. Kayla's parents know everything now. And her school. That didn't just happen." I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Mark, I've been trying to hold this family together. Why would I stir up more trouble?" His jaw worked, but he didn't have an answer. He pushed his plate away and stood. "If I find out it was you." I met his glare with a steady look. "You'll what? Leave me?" He froze for a second, then walked out of the room without another word. I sat there alone at the table, my fork resting against my plate, and let the silence settle in. The trap had closed, and neither of them even knew how tight it was going to get. The meeting with the lawyer was arranged under the excuse of running errands. I parked 2 blocks away from the office, just in case Mark drove past. Inside, the lawyer, a sharp woman named Harris, slid a folder across the desk. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were bank statements I'd never laid eyes on, accounts in Mark's name only, each with balances that made my stomach knot. Harris explained that if we divorced quickly, he could move those funds before they were counted as shared assets. "That's not all," she added, pulling another document from the folder. It was a loan agreement, My name and signature were there, but the handwriting wasn't mine. The house was listed as collateral. He forged this. My voice came out flat, but my pulse was racing. She nodded. If he defaults, the house is gone. I can help you secure it under your name alone, but you'll need to move carefully. I thanked her, took copies of everything, and left with my mind set. When I got home, I found Mark in the living room watching TV. Instead of keeping my distance like I had for weeks, I sat next to him. Want me to make you a drink? I asked. He glanced over, suspicious at first, then smirked. Sure. From that night on, I was softer with him. I laughed at his dull jokes. I made his favorite meals. I let him think the storm had passed. Each time I caught that smug look on his face, I knew he was buying the act. It was a strange game, pretending I didn't know what he'd done, pretending I was still the trusting wife. But the more comfortable he got, the more careless he became. One evening, as I was refilling his glass, I caught Ethan standing in the hallway, just out of Mark's sight. His eyes flicked from me to his father, then back to me. There was no confusion in his face this time, only understanding. Later, when Mark went upstairs, Ethan lingered in the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher. You're up to something, he said quietly. I didn't look at him. What makes you say that? Because you've been acting like you forgave him, and I know you didn't. I kept my hands busy with the dishes. Sometimes it's better to wait until the right moment. He leaned against the counter, studying me. Then I guess we're on the same page. I glanced at him, and for a second we just looked at each other. We didn't need to say more. From then on, he didn't ask questions about my sudden kindness to Mark. And I didn't ask about the late-night calls or the messages he kept sending. We both knew we were moving toward something. The difference was, Mark thought he was winning. Ethan didn't tell me his plan in advance. All I knew was that he left the house one Saturday afternoon with a small backpack and a calm look on his face. Later, I found out he'd texted Kayla, asking to meet at the park, just to talk things out. He told her he wanted closure, that he was tired of the drama. She must have believed him, because she showed up. They sat on a bench near the far end, where fewer people walked by. Ethan kept his phone in his lap, recording everything. He asked a few soft questions at first. How she'd been, if she ever regretted what happened. Then he let her talk. Kayla didn't hold back. She bragged about how easy it had been to get things from him. Concert tickets, clothes, and how much more she got from Mark. Men are predictable, she laughed. You just make them feel important, and they'll give you anything. When she finished, Ethan made a show of nodding like he understood. But the moment he got home, he sent the recording straight to her college admissions office with a short note. This is the kind of person you're giving a scholarship to? 2 days later, word came back, scholarship revoked. She could still attend if she paid full tuition, but everyone knew she couldn't afford it. Around the same time, the first creditor called the house. Mark's voice carried down the hallway, confused, defensive, promising he'd look into it. The next day, another call came, then another. His tone changed with each one, growing sharper, more panicked. It wasn't random. I'd been busy behind the scenes, making sure those hidden accounts he thought I didn't know about were frozen and certain debts were redirected to his name alone. I never had to touch his money directly. All it took was a few careful moves and some paperwork to make his life very uncomfortable. Every evening, I'd sit across from him at dinner and ask about his day, smiling while he picked at his food. He'd mutter something about bad luck or a mix-up at the bank. I'd nod sympathetically, pass him the salt, and watch the crease between his eyebrows deepen. Ethan kept quiet about his own part in Kayla's downfall, but I could tell by the faint smirk on his face when her name came up that he knew exactly how satisfying it had been. Mark never suspected the two of us were working separately toward the same goal. He still thought my new kindness meant I was letting things go. And he had no idea that each polite smile I gave him was just another step toward making sure there was nothing left for him to stand on when the time finally came. I told Mark I wanted to have everyone over for dinner. I said it was time to put the past behind us, that I was tired of all the tension. He looked surprised but agreed quickly, probably thinking he'd finally won me over. On Friday evening, the table was set with candles and fresh flowers. I'd cooked a full meal, roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, even homemade bread. Mark looked pleased, Kayla seemed cautious, and her parents walked in with polite smile. Ethan kept a straight face, but I caught the flicker of anticipation in his eyes. Dinner started smoothly enough. There was small talk, light laughter. I poured wine, making sure everyone's glass stayed full. Kayla's mother complimented the food, and I thanked her warmly. Mark leaned back in his chair, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. When dessert came out, chocolate pie with whipped cream, I stood up. Before we eat, I have something I'd like to share, I said, reaching for the small speaker on the counter. Mark frowned. What's this? You'll see. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room. Just as soon as the money's sorted, I'll be out of here. You know I want you. Last time was God, I can't stop thinking about it. Kayla's parents froze, forks halfway to their mouth. Kayla's eyes widened. Mark's face went pale. The rest of the conversation played, his promises, his bragging. The only sound afterward was the hum of the refrigerator. Kayla's father slammed his hand on the table. You lied to us, Kayla. You told us. Her mother stood, pointing at Mark. And you, shame on you. With a girl your son's age. Mark started to stammer, but I raised my voice just enough to cut through. There's more. As of last week, the house is in my name alone. The loan you took out with my forged signature has been nullified. And the accounts you've been hiding? Frozen. You now have nothing, Mark. The color drained from his face completely. You. Yes, I said evenly. Me. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a small grin spreading across his face. Kayla's parents turned their anger fully on their daughter, who was now crying into her hand. Mark pushed his chair back so hard it scraped the floor. I'm done here. Good, I said. He stormed toward the door. Kayla jumped up and followed him, still crying, her parents shouting after her. The front door slammed, leaving the room strangely quiet. Ethan looked at me, still smiling. Well, he said, that was better than dessert. I sat back down, letting the moment settle, the pie untouched in front of me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, Mark showed up at the front door like nothing had happened. He rattled the handle, then pounded on the wood. Open up, he shouted. I stayed in the living room calm. The locks had been changed the night before. Beside the porch steps sat 3 large trash bags filled with his clothes, shoes, and whatever else he had left behind. He banged again. You can't do this. I didn't answer. Eventually, the pounding stopped, and I watched through the curtain as he kicked one of the bags before storming off. That afternoon, I uploaded the full recording of his call with Kayla to a local gossip page under a fake profile. I didn't add any names, just a man cheating with his son's girlfriend. But it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. The story spread fast, picked up by a local blog, and then shared over and over until it was everywhere in our town. 2 days later, Mark called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short, tight with anger. I lost my job. They said it's because of some clause in my contract. I hope you're happy. I was. Ethan didn't answer his calls either. He blocked his father's number and ignored the few attempts Mark made through mutual friends. I don't need him, Ethan said one evening as we sat in the kitchen. His tone wasn't bitter, it was final. Kayla, meanwhile, had taken up with another man, older again, someone she met online. I only knew because word got around, and Lisa sent me a screenshot of a comment thread tearing Kayla apart. Her new relationship was already attracting the same kind of whispers she'd dealt with before. Everywhere she went, someone had heard the story. I didn't feel sorry for her. Mark's calls slowed over the next week. From what I heard through others, he was staying in a friend's basement, struggling to find work. His once confident, smug personality had been replaced with desperation. Every time I passed the porch and saw the space where his car used to sit, I felt lighter. The house was quiet, peaceful. I could walk into my own kitchen without tension hanging in the air. Ethan started focusing more on school and his friends, though I still caught that same sharpness in his eyes when Mark's name came up. We didn't talk much about him anymore. We didn't need to. By then, everything that needed to be done was already in motion. Mark had lost his home, his job, and the respect of almost everyone who knew him. Kayla had her own mess to deal with, and I had exactly what I wanted, a clean break, with both of them carrying the weight of their choices for everyone to see. It had been a month since I'd last heard his voice when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the moment I answered, I knew. It's me, Mark said, his voice rough. I'm living in my car. I can't find work. I don't have anywhere to go. Please, just meet me. We can talk. I let a pause stretch before answering. Fine. Tomorrow. The cafe on Main Street. The next afternoon, I arrived early. I wasn't alone. Across from me sat a real estate agent, a neat stack of papers between us. When Mark walked in, he spotted me right away. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unwashed. He came over, relief flashing across his face, until he saw the woman at the table. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. I smiled politely. Just signing some final documents. The house sold this morning. His eyes widened. You sold the house? Yes, I said, sliding the papers toward the agent. For double what we paid. The market's good right now. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Where are you going to live? In Florida, I said evenly. Ethan and I are moving next week. New place, new start. You can't just. I can, I said, cutting him off. The house is mine. Remember? The agent gathered her things and excused herself, leaving us alone. Mark sat down heavily in her chair. You don't have to do this. We can figure something out. I looked at him carefully. We already did. You made your choices. I made mine. His hands tightened into fists on the table. So you're just going to leave me here? Yes, I said. Here's the thing. You don't get to burn everything down and then ask me for shelter from the fire. He leaned back, shaking his head. You've changed. No, I said, standing. I've stopped letting you win. I took my bag from the back of the chair and started for the door. Wait, he called after me. At least. I didn't turn around. The bill's yours. I walked out into the warm afternoon, the sound of the cafe's door closing behind me. I didn't look back. On the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan. It's done. Start packing. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. Florida wasn't just a move. It was the end of one life and the start of another. Whatever came next, it wouldn't have him in it. Florida suited us from the start. The air was warm, the mornings smelled of salt from the ocean, and the streets were lined with palm trees swaying in the breeze. Ethan and I found a small storefront a few blocks from the beach and turned it into a coffee shop. It wasn't much at first, second-hand tables, a few chairs, and a counter we painted ourselves, but it felt ours in a way nothing else ever had. We worked side by side, sanding wood, hanging shelves, picking beans from a local roaster. On opening day, the shop was buzzing before the doors even unlocked. Tourists in sandals waited outside with locals who had already heard about the place from friends. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room, and the sound of laughter bounced off the walls. I was behind the counter, pouring a cappuccino, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I wiped my hands and pulled it out. A Facebook notification popped up, a tagged photo in a community group from our old town. Curious, I opened it. There he was, Mark, standing behind the counter of a small gas station, wearing a faded uniform shirt with a name tag. The caption read, "New guy at the Shell station. Be nice, folks." I stared at the photo for a second, taking in the slouch of his shoulders, the tired look on his face. Ethan stepped beside me with a tray of muffins. "What's that?" he asked. I tilted the screen toward him. He looked at it, then broke into a laugh. "Best revenge is living well, right?" I slid the phone back into my pocket. "Right." We went back to work, serving customers, clearing tables, and greeting new faces. The day passed in a blur of espresso shots, clinking cups, and people saying they'd be back tomorrow. That night, after we locked up, Ethan and I sat outside on the little bench by the door, listening to the waves in the distance. The street was quiet, the shop's sign glowing softly above us. I thought about how far we'd come, from the chaos, the betrayal, the shouting, to this peaceful night in a place where no one knew us as anything other than the owners of a good coffee shop. The photo of Mark flickered briefly in my mind. Not with anger, not with longing, just certainty. He'd made his choices, and they'd brought him exactly where he was. I smiled, not because of the shop, though it made me proud, and not because of the sunshine or the ocean, though I loved them both. I smiled because I knew the truth. Mark would carry the memory of losing everything for the rest of his life, and I would never have to think about him again.